Fantastic. Okay, so we have our panel on. Sarah, I'd like to pass over to you to begin when you are ready.
Great, thank you, Noel. And hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, A Paradigm Shift in Data Management, Data as a Service and the Digital Agenda. As Noel said, my name is Sarah Bunwell and I'm the editor of Insurance Investor and Fund Operator, and I'm going to be moderating today's session. Before I introduce our panelists, I just wanted to give a bit of context to the conversations we'll be having. So the focus of our discussion is on the paradigm shift in how buy-side firms are approaching their data strategy. We're going to be examining the widespread adoption of a new disruptive approach known as data as a service. Data as a service refers to a complete managed solution that covers all aspects of a firm's market and reference data management, including its business operations and change management processes. Data as a service also provides access to dedicated specialist advisors that help firms stay on top of industry, regulatory, and market changes. So why is this such a hot topic and why are we discussing it now? Well, the current environment means that being agile enough to adapt, change, and seize new opportunities is key to success for buy-side firms. That means organizations need fast access to clean and accurate market and reference data that can power the decision-making process. Unfortunately, outdated systems mean that data management continues to be an expensive and time-consuming burden for many firms. These data approaches are not market differentiating, and more worryingly, they fail to deliver the agility needed to drive business outcomes. As a result, forward-looking companies are rethinking their data management strategies. Many are looking to embrace new, more holistic approaches, like data as a service, often as part of a wider digital transformation journey. So today, our panelists will be discussing how firms can successfully revamp their data management, as well as how to overcome some of the common pitfalls along the way. So now it's time to meet our panelists. And as I introduce each one, I will come to them and ask them to just give a short overview of who they are and their current role. So our first panelist is Ruchir Verma, Head of Global Services Investment Management at Zurich Insurance Group. Ruchir, can you talk to us a little bit about your role?
Sure, thanks, Sarah. So I'm the Global Head of Global Services for Investment Management, part of Zurich Insurance Company. Now, investment management in Zurich is run as a business, and I look after the back office part of investment management. So in my role as Head of Global Services, I have a wide mandate. So I have global process ownership for investment operations, accounting, and amongst other things, I also have a data management and integration team, which includes the market and master data team. I've been with Zurich for 10 years, but for the last 3 years in my current role, and maybe one of the key things worth noting for the audience is that we went through moving from a traditional data management approach to data as a service recently, and we have been live on the service now for the last 6 months or so. That's it. Thank you.
Lovely. Great, thank you. Next up, we have Frank Henderson, Head of Security Solutions and Market Data at MEAG Asset Management. Frank, can you talk a little bit about your role?
Yeah, sure, Sarah. Thanks. Welcome to everybody. My name is Frank Henderson. I work for MEAG Asset Management and responsible there for the entire stack of market data that comprises demand management, procurement, license management, daily operations from the technical side as well as from the business side. So if anyone in the company wants any kind of market data from our global perspective, we are based in New York and in Munich and also in Hong Kong. They will come to me, and I have to make sure that data there is available. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you very much. Next up, we have Phil Tattersall, Associate Partner, Wealth and Asset Management Consulting at EY. Phil, can you talk about your role a little bit?
Yeah, hi, I'm Phil Tattersall, Associate Partner at EY, where I lead our data transformation solution for wealth and asset management in EMEA. What we'll do is help wealth managers, asset managers, alternative asset managers, and asset services use data and technology to transform and improve their business and operating models.
Lovely, thank you. And last up, we have Ramesh Rabadea, Director, Global Strategy Management at SimCorp. Ramesh, can you talk a little bit about your role and what you're bringing to our roundtable?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. Yes, my name is Ramesh Rabadea, and so my role within SimCorp is go-to-market strategy for data management, and data care or data as a service is a core pillar within data management for us.
Brilliant, thank you. So we're about to start the panel proper, but before that, I just wanted to introduce our first polling question of the day, which hopefully should be appearing on your screen any second now. There we go. So the first question is, what's included in your firm's digitization strategy? And this is a multiple choice question, so you can pick any that apply. And if you'd like to start answering that, we'll come back and we'll reflect on your responses in just a little bit. But now I wanted to move on to my first question, which was, when thinking about market and reference data management, where does data as a service fit into the wider digital agenda? And Rashir, perhaps as somebody who's gone through a data as a service shift recently, how does this fit into your wider digital agenda?
Yeah. Sure, thanks, Sarah. I mean, no surprises here. Data as a service is clearly an integral part of our digital agenda, and hence at the very top of the company with the senior management visibility, right? Data, I guess it's no different to any other company. It's one of the biggest focus areas, more strategic day by day. And we think of data as service as one of the components of our digital strategy, right? Maybe I can highlight two key parts here. One is what's different with data as a service compared to our other digitization agenda, is that this is more about a change in model, right? When we talk about digitization in the company in general, we talk about skills, capabilities, technologies, how do we automate certain things and so on. But with data as a service, this is the change in the model and a change in the mindset that we bring to the table, right? So for example, if you were thinking about a mindset change, right? This is about becoming more outcome oriented rather than a processing mindset. So we are not looking to process the data ourselves in this model. We are looking to understand and best utilize the outcome from data as a service, right? So this is about a governance mindset, a business mindset, thinking about, we got the outcome. Now, what do we need to add further value that is very specific to our company, right? That's one of the key differentiators when we talk about DaaS. And secondly, maybe also flag a bit that the indirect effect of data as a service is it acts as an enabler for the next level of digitization. So you have the basics of data management concepts in there. You have a data dictionary, you have a lineage, you have a very good basis, a building block on which you can base the rest of your data management strategy. So we look at it from those two perspectives.
Lovely, thank you. Frank, coming to you next, where do you see data as a service fitting into the wider digital agenda?
Yeah, we are running the operations today in-house. We have experts, we have systems, we have well-established processes. So it's working fine, and we can manage the existing complexity, and I think we can go also a little bit far ahead of that. But seeing the entire demand on market data and also on security master data and mixing it up, and other factors coming in like ESG, where you mix existing data with new data, where if you calculate new figures, and you have to integrate these data into the entire value chain from portfolio management till the reporting, even in the general ledger. ESG data is comprised today. You really have to keep in mind other options than doing it yourself. And I would say there, data as a service comes into the play. And I would suggest thinking about it on a case-by-case basis and really checking how good are you? Can you deliver quality? Is the price okay? The price of operations, is the time okay? Because we have always hard timelines to deliver new things for projects. So, and when you really come to the point where you are struggling, you should really think about, okay, which other option can I choose? Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you, Frank. Phil, coming to you lastly on this question, where do you see data as a service fitting into that wider digital agenda?
Yeah, so firstly, I think that wider perspective, exactly the right perspective. When we think about the buy-side industry dynamics, the structural challenges and pressures on margins leading for a need for scalable growth, and that's concurrent with the need to invest in things like digital growth areas, refining the investment proposition. So how do you square that circle? And one key way is to do things differently and better And part of that is to more broadly embrace an ecosystem with partners, buying in more services from those partners so you do less internally yourself. And that enables that acceleration in the delivery of the required new capabilities. And leveraging DaaS gives you that required acceleration in the data efforts. And when we think about digitization specifically, right now for lots of firms, their data is not digital ready. So it's an urgent need to accelerate that readiness for many firms across the buy side.
Got it. Thank you. That's great. So next up, I'm not sure, we've got a bit of a problem with the polls at the moment. So we were going to come to the poll, but I'm actually going to jump to our second question and then come back to the poll in a second. So our second question was, are data management models adequately equipped to support firms' digital agendas? And what are the shortfalls of traditional approaches? And Frank, can I come to you first on this one? What do you see, are traditional data management models adequately equipped, and what are the shortfalls of them?
Yeah, sure. I would say the digital agenda is to aim to automate processes, to get rid of all these manual tasks in between and throwing data from here to there. And as Ramesh said in the beginning, you really need to concentrate on the outcome. The business effect of data, it has just to be there in the right quality and in the right time. And therefore, all the new demand that you have, you need to be very flexible, and you need to have good systems which you can manage, but as well you need educated analysts. And if you have that in place and you can scale up your operations, and by the way, not only scale up your operations, you have to be more lean in the future, more direct to bring the business output that's needed. Then I would say you are good enough, but you will be challenged by data as a service, and you really keep in mind to keep the pace with that service up. And if you cannot keep the pace up, you should change maybe your strategy. And we are observing it, what's possible in the market and where we can jump on. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Ramesh, coming to you next, what did you see as some of the shortfalls of more traditional approaches, and do you think that they're adequate to support a digital agenda?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I echo what Frank said, and maybe I can give some examples from our side, because we used to have what we call a traditional approach to it. So we had an on-premise solution as our traditional model, right? So we had an EDM software installed on our premise. We used to manage the infrastructure, all the services, everything I think that Frank is currently responsible for in-house, right? So we had our IT department and so on. The challenge was really that it was not very efficient, first of all, right? We have too many different people from too many different groups trying to form the process chain in this whole thing, right? It's not with my team only. It was always project managers, change managers, IT, infrastructure. So you have to align a lot of things to get things done. So that's inefficient. Secondly, it's complexity because of customization and so on. I mean, we are not a software shop. We are not people who are going to manage this on a day-to-day basis in the best possible way. We are not scaled up to do that. So which meant when we had to make a change, we made the change in our way, which meant more customization specific to us, which meant more complexity and so on. I mean, things were not bad, as in they were not breaking, but they were certainly complex. They always took longer to do some things that cost us a bit more than it should have or could have, right? So this was definitely inefficient, longer time to market, risk prone because of the complexity that we're building in our model. So that's, let's say, the downside of our traditional model. And then from a question about digital agenda, it was really holding us back from moving forwards with our digital agenda, because our capacity of the people who were experts in data, who understood technology, who understood our industry, they were tied up in these activities that were repetitive, not necessarily differentiating, value-adding activities, but they were creating these building blocks and processing data. And that was, I would say, one of the major things amongst others.
Got it. Thank you very much. Ramesh, coming to you next. What why is it that do you use it in your conversations with your clients, etc.? Are you finding that their data management models are adequately equipped to support their digital agendas? And what do you see as the kind of shortfalls to the more traditional approaches?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Again, in terms of reflecting what Frank and Rashir said, it's very much, the flavor of when you look at firms in general. So there's different starting points. So some firms pretty much are going down the route of very manual processes, where disparate silos of data sit. And then you've got the people that have already embarked on a journey with a data management operating model. But what you consistently find is that they just lack scalability and agility, especially now with these volatile markets that we have, and demands for greater access to data. So the process is really about kind of keeping up with those challenges, which may mean extensive customizations, and then you simply kind of morphing to a very specific, dedicated solution. And that leads to operational risk issues as well. So that's very much a kind of a key outcome that I'm finding when I'm talking to our clients and firms. And so it's difficult to support, difficult to extend, and then transparency becomes a big issue. You really don't understand the data, and then that leads to data quality issues. The data quality is a key requirement. If you can't rely on the data then you can't trust it. And with the multiple views of truth, manual processes, without any governance, you simply can't deliver clean and reliable data to your business. And so for all of this, your business experts, as Rashir alluded to, is that your business experts are spending a lot of time and energy on fixing the data rather than really making good use of it.
Yes, got it. No, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. I'm just gonna, on polls, we've put all three of them live. So what we're actually going to do is, if you can answer all three of the polls, so the first one, which I already read out, and then the second one, which is your firm actively looking at deploying data as a service? And then the third one, which is which of the following would be the biggest driver for a change in uplifting your data management capabilities? If our audience members can address all three of those questions, and then towards the end, we'll come back and we'll get all of the results at once, and I'll ask all of the panelists to kind of comment on what you've said then. So you should have seen all three polls come up at the same time, and if you can just sort of go through all of those and answer them, that would be great. In the meantime, I'm going to come to our third question, which is, why should we be looking at more holistic approaches to managing market and reference data? What are the, what are the reasons that we need to be doing that? And I might come, I think I'll come to you next, Phil, on that. Can you give me a sense of why it's important that people start being more holistic about managing this data?
Yeah, sure, Sarah. So again, I think it's important to take a broad perspective here. Managing market and reference data are just two of the many demands on the data function. Firstly, there's loads of other domains of data. It might be investment book of record data, products, distribution data, and so on. And second, and I think Frank gave a couple of examples of this, the bar is always rising with new demands on the data function. So over the last few years, many buy-side firms have begun to integrate alternative data into their investment processes, stuff like social media, web search, what have you. And then recently, again, Frank mentioned huge slew of interest in, can I build sustainability through the value chain? And that means a whole load new set of ESG data sources. Now, I think firms conceptually understand how to manage it, how to govern it, etc., etc. But the overall set of demands is very difficult to keep up with. So if someone can do part of the work for you, such as supplying market or reference data, or in fact supplying other data sets as a service, then you're much more likely to be able to meet that slew of other demands, which, as far as I can tell, I'm quite old now, it just goes up and up and up, and that bar is always rising.
Brilliant, thank you. Coming to you next, Ramesh, I'm sure you've got some strong views on this. Why is it important that we look at more holistic approaches to managing market and reference data?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you really need to look at your overall operating model. I mean, does it make sense for your key talent to focus on non-differentiating commodity tasks, as Phil said. Like reference market data is widely available, and firms are facing the same challenge. You're fixing the same problem at each client. So, isn't it optimum to leverage a service to carry out this function, which is effectively, like a non-differentiating task? So for us, the service is really around the three pillars that we have as part of data as a service. The operations, that's ensuring timeliness, quality, and that's across all the asset types. And then the second pillar is around change. There's upcoming new data types that need to be onboarded, handling regulatory changes, which may be new attribute sets that you need to bring on, and constantly changing vendors as well, vendor feeds, vendor attributes. And these are all of a time critical nature. So you need to have the right operating model in place to react to this in a timely manner. And then most importantly is the advisory part of the service, so which is much more around future horizon scanning. So what's coming up in the future? We've had some examples like ESG as a very relevant topic for everyone. That's certainly kind of a big mine of activity that's happening. So so the advisory, it's about understanding these new requirements to the business and being one step ahead, and therefore you're really kind of optimizing the operating model. And underneath all of that service, you need to have a robust technology platform, which needs to be flexible enough to not restrict the outcomes needed.
Lovely, thank you. Rashir, coming to you next, you've been through this process. So why did Zurich Insurance Group decide to embark on a managed data service journey, and what were some of the key considerations that you took into account when you were making that decision?
So I think everyone's outlined the challenges quite well between Phil and Ramesh. So yes, those were the challenges. I already alluded to some of our internal challenges of being inefficient, having too much time to market, and so on. Maybe I can add a couple of things from an external factor, which is rising volatility, which Phil referred to already, right? So the markets are more volatile, which means you need to react much more quicker, change your portfolio, and so on. The complexity of products, alternatives are becoming mainstream these days. You're investing more and more in those complex classes, which the data is not the same as other classes. It's not structured, it's not available in the right format. So you need to spend a lot of time to get those data properly curated and ready to be used in business, right? So the complexity goes up, products go in a different direction, volatility pushes you on agility. You really need to react. And to top it all, I think both of them alluded to this, there is no competitive advantage in this particular master and market data, right? That's a data that's available to all industry participants. You can pick it up. There is nothing that is adding specific value to Zurich as a company in that. It is what you do with that data. So it's a building block. You get that data, get it in good quality, get it in good time, but then it is what you do with that that brings the value to it. So that was our starting point. We looked at it, we looked at the value chain, we looked at our challenges and said, okay, yes, it is something that's non-core, non-competitive advantage to us as a company. It is also something that is better than at a scale than we trying to figure out all of these and customize our software. Pretty sure other participants have similar demands. So there must be a vendor, there must be a service which can supply it to multiple vendors and meet our objectives as well. Right? So that was our thinking, what got us to, okay, we need to do something about it. When we got to that point, we looked at market. It was 2 years ago. We found two kinds of providers there mostly, right? One was the outsourcing vendors, so traditional outsourcing, people who came to us and said, look, we will replicate whatever you're doing and we will do it cheaper for you, right? From another location, maybe labor arbitrage, whatever it is. But the model was, we will do what you are doing at a better price point. That was not interesting or attractive enough for us because cost was not the biggest motivator for us. The more important factor was opportunity cost, to how do we get people out of this value chain onto higher value added tasks. And the other variety of vendors we found was feed providers who were saying, okay, We will provide you a feed of good quality data on time and so on and so on. The challenge there was more about dynamicity. We always look at how much time do we spend in getting a feed versus how much time do we spend in actually change managing that feed, implementing new requirements, whether it's regulatory, business driven, new product additions, and so on. And that was really not coming through to us from these propositions. So we spent some time with SimCorp at that point. We were part of one of their user forums. We went through and said, okay, look, we need, and I'm now copy pasting what Ramesh said about the components of this service, right? Operations, change management, and advisory. And I'm not copy pasting his views because this was something we developed jointly together with SimCorp. So we both came together and came with the service components here. And that made sense, right? So operations, you get timely, good quality data. Don't have to worry about. You're outcome focused. You don't worry about how it got there, but it got there and you can trust it. Right? There is good data management practice behind it, which is trustworthy. Change management, again, we focus now on business requirement. Why do we need a certain change and what do we want to do with it? And then we leave it to data care as a service to provide those change management. It has cut down our time to market by quite a lot. And advisory, and that's about future proofing, right? Keeping an eye on what's changing with the vendors, keeping an eye on what's changing with the industry, proactively managing and monitoring those things to add value to our business. So that's more or less how we got here and the key factors that took us here.
Great, thank you. It's great to have such good insight into kind of what you were thinking and how you went through it. I want to look at more of the risks of not doing it. And Frank, I think I want to come to you first on this one. So, you know, what risks do investment managers face if they settle with a data management model that's not future fit? You know, what happens if they don't bother addressing these concerns?
You have all these regulatory reporting, which we have seen over the last years, which is demanding a huge amount of data, where you have to introduce a lot of attributes into the security master data. And if you cannot fit the timelines because they are just given, they're just given by the authority. Normally it works, but you have other projects in the pipeline, so you have to mix it up, and you need to come out with the data in time. But it's not just the operational process. You have to look where you can integrate new vendors. You have to design new interfaces, and I would say the risk is you are spending a lot of capacity on a piece of work which doesn't give you a competitive advantage. Yeah? And I think this is also what Russia would try to say. Just working on generic products, which is everything producing, is not giving you the driver's seat in the company. Yeah? And when you really want to help the company, you should concentrate on other things in data management as just to integrate new data. So you risk the competitive advantage, and you risk also missing deadline or just prioritizing only on legal things. And the other thing is like ESG, that's a trend in the market, and it's a huge trend. There's a lot of data, but you need to do your job there and integrating this data well. So this is also a risk of not catching up with the market when you spend too much time in thinking about how you can organize the process instead of concentrating there on the outcomes.
Lovely, thank you. Rashir, coming to you now. I know you've touched on some elements of this, but you know, what do you see as the kind of key risks? What do you think the consequences would have been had you stuck with your old approach?
Sure. So I'll try not to replicate any of the points Frank made already. I think those are good points. But in general, if you look at it, right, the pace of change in this world is only accelerating. And with COVID last year, we were just talking before we began the session, 2020 was a big boost to digitization. It was a big boost to cloud in general. People made that move, right? So with all these changes, maybe there are two key points I would make. What problems you would face. One is on technology side. Now, what's available today in data management technology and the toolkit, 5 years ago, we would not have conceived of it, right? So if your data management platform is 5 years or older, you're definitely missing out on a lot of features, a lot of things that can cover your risk, a lot of things that can make your life easier, can control your quality, you can add validation rules, you can add artificial intelligence and so on, right? Technology is a big factor. On people's side, maybe that's the other point I will make is people are also moving very quickly, right? So today, if you go out and try to find a COBOL developer, maybe you will find 5 of them in the whole world, but that's not something that will keep you going in the future, right? We already talked about how it fits into digital agenda. Unless you have the right basic building blocks, your digital agenda can get stuck somewhere because your technology doesn't permit a certain thing. And people equally, right? The good people, I would assume they're moving with the times, with the technology onto new platforms. We need to keep up with that. Maybe on the positive side, because we're talking too much about what's the problem with it. I mean, on the positive side, right? If you move on to the latest platforms, it allows you to use all the benefits of the new technologies that you're getting with the AIs, with the machine learning, with bots, with IoT. I mean, you could not integrate with these technologies unless you were on a good enough platform, good enough place with that.
Great, thank you. Phil, coming to you last on this question, what do you view as the risks with kind of sticking with the status quo and continuing to use a data management model that's not future fit?
Yeah, so I think one of the problems is if most business users could wave a magic wand, their number one wish would be better quality data. And it's the, I think Ramesh, Rashir, Frank, you've all talked about aspects of this, but what you've got is because firms can't reliably supply trusted data to every single business process and usage, you have pockets of data management peppered through the business where people do, collating, merging, checking and cleansing of data, which leads to data quality issues in some circumstances, but also a fundamental lack of agility and scalability. And given the pace of change and demands, that's a problem. So I think people recognize intuitively the value of a trusted data layer, but most firms haven't been able to implement one. They just haven't been able to roll it out quick enough to meet all the new demands. I mean, Frank mentioned new regulations. We all know SFDR is coming. There's always something coming. There's always something you have to do. I think part of the answer has got to be a new data operating model that leverages a broad ecosystem of platform vendors, fintech, service providers to accelerate that delivery of trusted data. And I think you both mentioned, Rashir, lots of different new ways of accelerating it. The key point I think you made, Frank, to get the outcomes that you want. So I think it helps you raise the probability of getting the right outcomes.
Great, thank you. We've got absolutely loads of questions coming in the Q&A section, which is great. I just wanted to quickly put one of them to our asset owner members of the panels, because it kind of fits in with what we're talking about at the moment before we move on to our next question. So it was, are there any data sets that data management are responsible for that you wouldn't want to outsource? Frank, if I could come to you first, are there any kind of data sets where instinctively you think that there might be some discomfort about outsourcing them, or that you just point blank would never want to outsource?
No, to be honest, spontaneously I can't think of outsourcing any kind of data, because all these kinds of data are already in the market. So putting them back somewhere in the market, and the service data as the data service is not just a public and transparent piece. So no, I would think about for all kinds of data to choose that option.
Lovely, thank you. And Rashir, just coming quickly to you, when you were making your decisions, were there any kind of groups of data where you were like, no, we need to keep this in-house, or were you comfortable putting everything on the table from an outsourcing perspective?
So purely, yeah, I mean, good point. And I agree with Frank, in the long term, I think that's exactly right. Anything that is market and master data, which is generic and outside of the confidentiality or competitive advantage zone, you would say, why not? So maybe, but a couple of things just to provide a bit of color, depending on why the question was asked. There are certain asset classes. We talk about syndicated loans, for example, private debts, for example, some of these alternative complex classes of data. The way we receive data and some of these things from our asset managers and so on is that it comes together with some confidential information along with it. So we get a PDF or we get a report which includes our position in these instruments. So what we have done so far is we have taken a two-step approach. We take this data from the provider. We take what we consider as confidential data out of it, right? So Zurich's position, for example, being one of those. And then we provide that data to data care or data as a service, right? What we are aiming to do, again, because of technology permits it with data management tools, at some point we would like to have this information sent directly from the third-party asset manager to data care without including our confidential data. And that's possible, but it takes time because this is a bit of legacy. This is how we get it so far. I mean, talk about private equity and so on, but we are working on this. I wouldn't say we would rule it out, but I would say it's something to be careful about thinking through, and it takes a bit of time to get to the final result here.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, moving on to our next sort of panel question. This is more about, we're kind of looking more at the implementation. So it's, what are the key obstacles to embracing change for a data management strategy, and how can these be overcome? So Phil, what's your take on this? What are some of the key obstacles that firms might face down when they're embarking on this journey, and how can they be overcome?
Yeah, there's a few. I'll just cover one. So I think the core challenge that firms face is the business one. The structural pressures on margins, at the same time, the need to quickly develop and deliver new capabilities. Now, data is often a key impediment to those business outcomes. So it might be you want a digital offering, but your data is not digital ready. It might be you want ESG and sustainability through the value chain, but perhaps the board get ESG data from one source, clients from another source, regulators from another source, the investment process from another source. But I think one key obstacle for the data initiatives is firms won't normally articulate the priorities. We must sort out the data. They will articulate the priorities. We want to digitize the client experience. We want to embed sustainability through the value chain. We want scalable growth. And I think the way to overcome that specific obstacle is to very clearly and very directly establish the linkage between the business strategy, the business initiatives that deliver our strategy, and the data capabilities and outcomes that are required. And then linking the data program directly to how it supports the delivery of the business strategy helps the business case, and it transforms the conversation and really helps overcome that particular obstacle.
Great, thank you. Rashir, coming to you next. Which obstacle would you like to talk about when it comes to embracing change for data management strategy, and how can it be overcome?
I think Frank took the easy one, so I will go for a complex one. Sorry, Phil took the easy one. Yes, look, I will. Maybe I can talk about our experience for moving our data management strategy towards data as a service, right? And one of the key challenge there, because it's moving from an in-house service to a managed service environment, which means there is this element of, let's call it outsourcing, where you are now giving control, and that's seen as a big obstacle in large companies, right? You're giving up the control of data to a third party, and that's usually quite tough, and we had to come through that clearly. And when we looked at it, right, so we first thought about what control do we have in our current model, and what are the control points? How do we actually manage this? And then how can we actually transpose those control in the new model when it's being provided by a vendor? Some of those form part of the contract. Some of those are controlled by things like requesting a SOC 1 and SOC 2 report from the vendor to make sure they have the right processes and governance in place that we can transparently see and audit, right? So that some of these come from good data management practices. And one of the key things we more or less focused on was, okay, what's the biggest risk of losing control? It's mostly about the vendor itself, how stable the vendor is, how trusted the vendor is. Are they going to invest and keep on investing in their data management tools and the practices for our outcome is never outdated and so on, right? So it was a mix of these 2 or 3 key topics that brought us from that obstacle to say, yes, I think we can manage this, We put these controls in place, we trust the vendor. Now we are in a safe zone.
Great, thank you. Next, I'm going to come to Ramesh. I think, you work with a whole load of clients on implementing this stuff. What do they tell you? What's the biggest obstacle you see people mentioning, and how do you help them overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, Rashir kind of mentioned all the big ones, so I won't do a copy and paste on that one, but more kind of focusing on particular things. If you look at loss of control, it's like it's and transparency. It goes kind of hand in hand. And what we have done is, in terms of our service offering, is that we've come to a very kind of good position to say we bring something to the table. We bring a standard model, standard rules, a starting point, SLAs, but very much we want to bring something to the table as a starting point. And then the conversation is how much control is needed for our clients. So there's a flexible nature of our service. So one example could be that they want to devolve some of the activities around adding new attributes or adding new rules to the service, but then there may be a point of governance that they want to have final approval for before that data hits the actual receiving system. So yes, we've got the foundation in place, but then we very much talk to each individual client to say, if there's any variation on the service where you require more control, then we can do that for them, and that's really kind of worked really well for us. And then from a transparency point of view, as you would expect, you get full transparency. It's not a black box offering where something can pops out at the end. You actually get to understand how the journey the data takes on an intraday basis or a periodic basis. And then we really engage with the clients to kind of give them transparency as to how we're performing, how the service is performing. And then so they're fully aware what's going on. I mean, I think one of the things in terms of an obstacle, which was the question that was raised, was what data you would potentially outsource and which you wouldn't. So that's come up quite a bit. So security, sensitive data, but generally speaking, if it's commodity data, then we can handle it. But the desire is to have the service take on more data sets, as what Phil mentioned right at the beginning as well. So loss and control and transparency, but we feel that we have the model to accommodate that, kind of relieve that. Sorry.
Thank you. Frank, you're in the unenviable position of going last on this one. So is there anything that you would like to add in terms of obstacles, or do you think that they've all been covered?
Well, I think it's all been covered, yeah. I would only say in the end, you still need to control the process and you still need to control the outcome. But yeah, all my colleagues here in the round mentioned you really need to have trust in your outsourcing partner, and this can be achieved by a step-by-step process with the transparency that Ramesh mentioned. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to a very quick audience question again, and I think again it will be potentially one for either Rashir or Frank. So it's about it falls in line with these sort of challenges. So it's how do you manage business expectations when removing their comfort blanket of having the resource in-house, particularly with regards to turnaround time? So Frank, if I might come to you first, is turnaround time a concern for people internally? And if so, how might you kind of respond to that?
Yeah, I would say turnaround time is definitely an aspect because it's in the end when you can deliver the result, and it always depends from a case-by-case basis. But sometimes you really have a hard work with your individual data vendors, managing the contracts, getting to a license, fixing it, and especially when the legal department comes into play. This is really a meticulous job, and this costs always time. Sometimes I think, okay, these operational process, you just do your normal business job, and you have all your rules, and then it's done, and you know it's working in 10 days or in 20 days or whatever. But the first part, getting new data, is sometimes a really hard job.
Lovely, thank you. Risha, anything to add there in terms of managing the business expectations around turnaround time?
Yeah, I think we talked about this, right? So it is a mindset shift from processing to outcome based, right? So what business should be concerned about is the outcome, the quality of outcome, the timeliness of the outcome, not necessarily how exactly it's done and who exactly does it, right? And that's a mindset shift. And a great example is before this COVID lockdown and so on, I think we had different management styles. People wanted to see people working on the floor and what they're doing and things like that. And suddenly we went remote, and we started naturally focusing on the outcome, saying, okay, we want to see this output. Doesn't matter how you work, where you work, when you work. I think it's the same approach here, right? From a business point of view, they should be interested in the outcome. Am I getting the right quality data? And there, of course, you should put your validations, you should put your SLAs, you should put whatever metrics you want to measure it and say, did I get it or did I not get it? But from a point of view of exactly how it's being done, I don't, it takes time for that mindset to shift. I think that's really the key. Purely from a turnaround time perspective, as I said, we see a change, a positive change in the turnaround time by moving to the data as service model than before. So that's not been a challenge for us.
Great, thank you. Moving on to our last panel question. So I'm going to come straight back to you on this, Risha. You know, how does adopting the right data strategy empower data talent to focus on business outcomes, and what are some of the tangible benefits of data as a service? What have you found to be some of the benefits since you've made the switch?
Yeah, and I think I outlined before, one of our key imperatives was the opportunity cost, and that opportunity cost was because talent was tied up in activities that were not necessarily differentiating for us, right? So that's definitely one of the key success factors. But to maybe even before we go there, I want to outline again that this number of people, at least in my team, and I think it's similar in other companies, people who have this mix of knowledge, which is data, technology, industry knowledge, regulatory knowledge, who have been at the company for long, it's gold, it's hidden gold. And really how you can switch that from working on a daily processing activity to actually utilizing that talent into something that will create a unique value for you, that's absolutely the most wonderful lever, right? So with, I mean, don't want to repeat everything, but when we went to data as service, that was our first imperative. We have achieved already some capacity relief, right? We can see that we have started to trust the outcome. We have seen people saying, okay, I have more time to do other things. So we are on the journey towards upskilling those people and moving them into more analytical areas, more sensitivity analysis area, more kind of predictive analysis and so on, right? So things that will really add value, will help a decision-making by investment managers rather than just processing data. We are already moving there quite in a good way, right? It's only been 6 months, so I don't want to claim too much, but we see the light that, yes, this is actually happening.
Lovely, thank you. Frank, coming to you next, how can adopting the right data strategy empower data talent to focus on business outcomes, and what are some of the tangible benefits? Can I get your take on this?
Yeah, I would really suggest to really concentrate on the people, on the journey of the people, as Ramesh explained already. You have to scale up their knowledge. They have to learn new ways of working with data. In the past, it has just been throwing a file into a system and seeing if everything is there. But this has been long in the past, and over the last years, we have really concentrated on the processes and have streamlined them. And with good processes in place, the key for the future of the strategy is the knowledge of the people. And if you have good people and they really love their job, you can achieve anything within the shortest time.
Lovely, thank you. Phil, coming to you next. How does the right data strategy empower data talent to focus on business outcomes, and what are you seeing as some of the kind of real tangible benefits of adopting this approach?
I think Ramesh and Frank covered it, the really key points, and it's that allowing much more focus on the key question: does everyone have the right data they need to do their job?
Brilliant, thank you. Ramesh, coming to you last. Anything to add on this one? How can adopting the right strategy empower data talent to focus on outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, from a service provider perspective, like the way we constructed the service, the way we see it ourselves is an extension to the client's business experts, the change management team. So we protect the change management process, so it's dedicated resources handling the change process, whereas in some instances without the service, you have the same people doing multiple things. That might be doing operations, change processes, or looking ahead at what's coming up. So here there's the comfort that the aspect of change is taken care of, and we do that with the change. And then the advisory, as I mentioned before, really about kind of understanding what's coming up in the future, and being a trusted advisor and providing some kind of value so that the client experts can focus on the real power of the data and how they can get the insights they need. If you look at the technology side of things, there is a peace of mind that we're continually investing in the technology, and it was mentioned quite early in our conversation. Automation is part of the digital agenda, and for that, we're very much about investing in that, like with regard to machine learning, AI, IPA, intelligent process automation. And just to give you a concrete example, we applied these technologies from a traditionally manual process and to an automated one, and we got tenfold improvement in terms of elapsed time. So we've seen massive kind of improvements, which allows the client to be able to get at the data far quicker than they do now. So yes, it's good quality, and yes, they can kind of devolve that responsibility to us in terms of the process handling, but then more importantly, they can then get their hands on the data and really get value from it as well.
Great, thank you. Right, now I'm going to ask our technical whiz to hopefully put our poll results up, which I'm hoping will happen and work. We've got quite a lot to unpack here and not a great deal of time. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to come to Phil on the first poll, and then I'm going to come to Rashir and Frank on poll number 2, and then I'm going to come to Ramesh on poll number 3 to get your take on it, just so we can go through everything. So Phil, you're up first. Our first poll was what's included in your firm's digitization strategy? And it was a multiple choice one. So the top answer was automation with 83%. And the bottom answer was a joint kind of customer engagement and client self-enablement at 42%, and also leveraging EI and machine learning. What's your initial take on these poll results? Is there anything surprising there, or is it kind of what you were expecting firms to be focused on, or do you think there's anything missing? What's your views?
I think that really, as you can imagine, achieving all of those outcomes, that would be a tremendous thing for a business. So you can see why this is probably across the industry the #1 priority. And I'll just reiterate that point. You can do this, but if you don't have a firm foundational data layer, you're not going to get the outcomes you want. You're not going to get the automation you want. You have people falling on the floor. You're not going to get improved utilization of the data. You're not going to be able to get the insights from AI and machine learning. So I think concurrent with this, I think there's now a broad recognition you have to get your data ready for digital, and then you can get these benefits, which will obviously be fantastic for everyone.
Lovely, thank you. So our poll number 2 was, is your firm actively looking at deploying data as a service? 9% saying yes, 31% saying we're looking at all the options, 44% saying not for now, but maybe in the future, and 16% saying we already have a solution in place. Nobody saying not at all. Rashir, what's your take on this view? Is that kind of the mix that you'd expect? Is that kind of in line with how you thought about it? What's your view on this one?
I think it is an accelerating trend, right? So, I mean, not surprising that almost everyone is giving it a thought. Now, how mature they are in terms of being able to go there and take a decision, that's probably what we see in a staggered way here. But I absolutely think it is something to keep your eyes on. It is a trend that's accelerating and not without reason. It's something that, I think, referring back to the first question you asked me about, how is it a part of your digital agenda? I think people, maybe there are some companies who don't think of the model change or data as a service as part of digital agenda, and they look more at technology skills and capabilities. I would say this is a good and important component that should be looked at by the firms.
Great, thank you. Frank, coming to you now. What's your take on this poll result? Is it surprising? Is it what you expected? Is it in line with kind of how you feel about things? What's your view?
At least it's reflecting my voting, not now, but maybe in the future, because it gives you it gives you the option to design your processes, and this is always pretty good to know that there is an option, that you are not limited to your own process, to your own system, and to your own people. I would really try to concentrate here on the people, because I don't know who it said, the technology is outdated in 5 years. You have the best system now, in 5 years it's outdated. You have the best process now, in 5 years it's outdated. So really care on the people. Try them to pick up what's needed in the future, to think about the future, how they design the process of the future, what's needed tomorrow, and not let them type in data. And that's also why automation is very important. And then it's really a senior management decision, how many people want you to have concentrating on your internal processes, or are you really willing to outsource something? And yeah, there you have the possibilities, and that's good.
Great, thank you. And then our last poll, which of the following would be the biggest driver for change and uplifting your data management capabilities? Ramesh, I'm going to get you to comment on this one. Again, it was a multiple choice, so people could pick what they wanted. Up at top was outdated data infrastructure and legacy systems, and in last place was concern over data security and transparency, with everything else sort of mixed in between. But I think outdated infrastructure was ahead by quite a way. Is that what you'd expect? Were there any surprises in there? You know, what can we take from those results?
Yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much reflects in my findings when I'm talking to firms and our clients, etc. So they're really kind of reviewing the platforms, and so 2/3, as you said, 2/3 are really seeing that the current infrastructure is outdated, and so now kind of reflecting on what the right operating model is. I mean, I think like you fix that infrastructure, then you get the benefits on the other points. So the data management related costs and optimization will come naturally with that. The ability to handle larger volumes of data will naturally come part of that as well. So the other one, kind of one leads to the other. So I think that's a right way to focus.
Great, thank you. I guess we're actually out of time, so I guess we're going to have to leave it there, having reflected on what the audience thinks. It's a shame, because I get the feeling that we could have quite cheerfully continued talking about this for another hour or two. But yeah, as I said, we need to wrap up now. So I guess it's left for me to thank all of our audience for asking so many questions, and all of our panel members for being so open and sharing their experiences, and to thank everybody for joining us. So thank you all, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Bye.